Hello there, Aural Skills. It's Miss Cary. Hope everyone's doing well. Our subject matter is starting to get a little more complicated. So please reach out if you have any questions or you want to do a practice session with me. We can schedule a Zoom session. So I'm here to go over Module 8 and talk about how chords function. So this is going to be pretty detailed, and the quiz is going to be open book, unlimited tries, and so I want you to use your module and your instrument and work through these chord resolutions and really experience it and listen to it, and make sure you know what you're hearing. We really, in a perfect world, we would spend more time on these. So for the next few weeks, I'm going to introduce these concepts. And these are really more ear training 2 concepts. But we'll practice them together. And it's just good to know how things work intellectually, even if we can't quite identify them like that yet. So let's look at Module 8. In previous modules, we have discussed how to construct and identify various foundational elements of music, including intervals, scales, and chords. Moving forward, we will be discussing how to apply these nuts and bolts of music in various musical contexts, focusing on the ways in which they have been used historically in various contexts. So we're going to talk about how these chords usually resolve in the classical music that's been written up to this point. And so you could argue I like chords that do different things, but this is just what traditional ears have been used to. There's also physical properties to the consonants and dissonants that supports why they resolve one way or another. So let's get into it. In Module 6, we learned about the diatomic harmonies in major keys. Knowing what the harmonies are is only the first step. So thinking about the triads on each scale degree, whether they're major or minor. It is important to remember that each chord possesses a specific function in a key, major or minor. We will discuss the functions of chords of minor keys in Module 11. So this will just be about major keys. A function of chord essentially relates to how chords relate to one another in the musical process of tension and release, or from consonance to dissonance. To understand how chords function, we need to first study how the individual notes that make up a major scale in a major key relate to one another. So each scale degree has a name, and the chord built on that scale degree has the same name. So let's see. Number 1 is the tonic, home base, the tonal center. 2, the supertonic, one step above the tonic. 3, the mediant. 4, subdominant, and 5, dominant. So the 5 chord and the 5 note have a greater presence in relation to the tonic than these other ones. Perhaps because it's the first overtone. Other than the octave, the next is the 5th. Within the 5th is the fundamental. So the dominant pulls to the tonic, implies the tonic more strongly than any of the other notes. Submediant and leading tone. The leading tone wants to be the tonic. There's a strong pull. 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It wants to be the tonic. It's the closest thing to the tonic. Half step. All right. The tonic, or first note of any scale, is considered the note around which all other notes in the scale revolve. It is for this reason that a piece typically begins and ends on the tonic. The supertonic is appropriately named because it is one note above the tonic. This is typically considered a dissonant note in the context of the major scale. It's a second. Crunch. The mediant represents the third scale degree. Oh, the beautiful third. And is considered a consonant note in the context of the major scale. Subdominant, or on number 4, is one of 2 tendency tones, or dissonant notes that have a strong tendency to, or need to resolve to another note. The other tendency tone is the leading tone, or 7th scale degree. All right, taking this in. Both the subdominant and the leading tone are a half step away from a consonant note in the major scale. So the half step has a pull. Respectively, the subdominant is a half step above the mediant, and the leading tone is a half step below the tonic. So, the subdominant, number 4, wants to resolve to the 3 because of that half step. And the leading tone wants to resolve to the 1. So there it is written out. It has a tendency to go down there. Tendency to go up. The dominant represents the 5th note of the scale. The submediant represents the 6th note of the scale. So think about how 5ths and 4ths are inversions of each other. So the 5th is the dominant and a 4th is the subdominant. 3rd and 6th are inversions of each other. So the mediant is the 3rd and the submediant is the 6th. So notice how it is a 3rd below the tonic, whereas the median is a 3rd above the tonic. As we saw in Module 6, each of the notes in the scale corresponds to chords built upon those notes, the triads on each note. For example, the 1 triad is built on scale degree 1. The minor 2 triad is built on scale degree 2, and so forth. There are commonly used chord progressions, which are harmonic sequences of chords, and I've been giving you some of these on your quizzes. These are used to support melodies. Used in Western music, which are based around the principle of tension and release between individual notes within the scale. So consonance and dissonance. So everywhere there's dissonance in the scale, there's a traditional way where people have handled it. Either it tends to do this and it's comforting to let it do what it wants, or perhaps composers have enforced these pairings. You can be the judge. But it's good to know because it's how a lot of songs work. All right. Because there are so many progressions, musicians will often refer to chords by both the actual chord, for example, the 1 chord, 2 chord, etc., or by categories of chord. there are three categories of chord that possess broad harmonic functions. In a major key, these are, respectively, tonic chords 1 and 6. So 1 is obviously the tonic. Why is 6 the tonic? Because of the relative minor. So that's the tonic of the, you can still, within the major scale, you can play a natural minor scale. So you have two tonics. The dominant chords, 5 and 7 diminished. And the predominant chords, 2, 4, and 6. So, let's see how Jason words this. You may have noticed 3 things for 3 chord categories. Excuse me. First, the 6th chord can function as both a tonic and a predominant chord. Depending on the musical context, different chords can possess different functions. When we discuss chromatic harmony and modulation in the next level of the class, we will see this even more often for chord functions. Secondly, you may have noticed that the 3 chord is absent. At best, the 3 chord is considered a weak predominant chord. However, it is still used in various contexts. Thirdly, you may have noticed that 2 of the chord categories share names with 2 of the chord types. Be careful to distinguish between the category of tonic chords and the actual chord that is the tonic chord, if it wasn't confusing enough. This is the same principle applies for dominant chords. So for our class, aural skills, I'm going to be mostly concerned with being able to hear the relationships. So you should study the examples of chord progressions, and that's what we will study for the quiz. I'm going to keep going through this, and when we get to the examples, I'm going to switch over to part 2, and we'll go over to the piano and listen to them together. All right, let's see. Where did I stop? Okay. Tonic chords, the category. The 1 and 6 chords represent chords that establish the primary note of a key. The 1 chord represents the chord around which all other chords revolve in a major key. So the 1 is the tonal center. The 1 chord, home base. In the relative minor key, the 6th chord represents the chord around which all other chords revolve. It's the new tonic. It's the minor tonic. It is important to remember that there are many chord progressions that do not resolve to the tonic chord. That's what I was thinking when they were saying the 3's not up there because it's not as strong. But you may choose to use the 3 for something a little different. If you're making a chord progression, you might want to try the 3 because it'll be like, oh, that's unusual. Doesn't have a strong pull, but I think the minor 3 is beautiful. And the songs that use it, I always think are cool. Oh gosh, we got the fire truck. However, it is more common than not for a chord progression, particularly at the end of a musical work, to resolve to a tonic chord. It signals the end of the piece. Figure 1-3 shows the 2 tonic chords, respectively, in the key of C major. So we've got the 1 chord, 1, 3, 5, and 6, 6, 1, 3. I was trying to scroll the TV. Dominant chords represent the category of chords which are the farthest harmonically from the tonic chords, farthest harmonically. Figure 1-4 shows the two dominant chords respectively in the key of C major. So 5 and 7, they don't have any of the same chords that C, the chords have it. A 5 chord doesn't have any of the same notes except for the 5. So that's harmonically very different from the tonic chord. And the 7 is one note off the tonic, so that's half steps away from the tonic chord, so that's really different. One has to only listen to and observe the notes in each of these different chords to see how they relate. The 5 chord, for example, contains the individual notes 5, 6, 7. Notice how none of these notes, notice how one of these notes, the leading tone, is a tendency tone that needs to resolve to the tonic. And then we demonstrate that resolution. So I think this is a good time for me to take it over to the piano, and we can hear how this works.